It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and we're only 2 weeks away from wrapping up 1998. We've got December 18th, 1998, the week before Christmas, and we have 3 movies to look at, 2 notable films, and one you probably not have heard of before. I know I certainly didn't before I looked at the list here, but we got 3 notable films to look at this week, so let's go ahead and jump right on into it. We'll start off with the reunion of everybody from Sleepless in Seattle, director Nora Ephron, and stars Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan in You Got Mail. Like I said, this is the reunion for Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. This is actually the 3rd time they paired up. The first film they did, of course, was Joe vs. the Volcano, and then they did Sleepless in Seattle, and their movies together have been really good. Joe vs. the Volcano is a very underrated comedy directed by John Patrick Shanley. Sleepless in Seattle, a good, fun romantic comedy with Nora Ephron directing this, and You've Got Mail is just as good as Sleepless in Seattle. I would probably say it's definitely it's a little bit better, actually, that I think about it. You have the story here of 2 people who are in an online romance who are unaware that they're actually business rivals, and it marks the third, like I said, it marks the 3rd pairing of Hanks and Ryan. I'm reading the description off of Wikipedia here, but basically, obviously the title takes its name from the greeting AOL users get when they get new emails. You've got mail. And it's funny because this was before Warner Brothers was bought out by America Online. Time Warner was actually bought out by America Online. And you would see on the bottom of the Warner Brothers logo, an AOL Time Warner Company for a little bit there, so it's kind of amusing that their name is attached to this. But their mail thing is on there. But yeah, like I said before, it's a really good movie. I put it on the same length as something like Sleepless in Seattle. There are times when it actually does get a little bit better. It's a little bit better than Sleepless in Seattle, but everything that makes Sleepless in Seattle kind of fun, it's definitely in here. Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan just have that great chemistry that they always have together. And I think this was the last time they appeared together in a movie. I could be wrong on that, but this might have been the last time. But you also have a really good cast overall. You see Dave Chappelle there in the trailer, as well as Greg Kinnear. Steve Zahn is also in here. Parker Posey, Gene Stapleton. I thought I saw Donald Logue there for a minute, but I don't see his name in the credits. But Dabney Coleman's also in the film. Heather Burns, Sarah Ramirez from Grey's Anatomy, Rico Olivesworth from 24 is also in the film. It's got a good cast overall. It's actually based off... This movie is actually a remake of a film called The Shop Around the Corner, which was in of itself was adapted from a Hungarian play in 1937 called Parfumé, which has actually been adapted several times. There was also another version called In the Good Old Summertime. So this is basically a modern version of that. And this was still when the internet was relatively new. I mean, this is still well before the internet became what it has become 25 years later. I mean, a lot of people still were they still didn't have a good idea of what the internet was, and what the internet overall was. Around this time, they were slowly but surely starting to get around to it. Amazon was very big at the time. Yahoo, Ask Jeeves was a big thing that really doesn't exist anymore. This was before the days of Google. It's very interesting to see what the world was like before it eventually became, the computer world became eventually what it has become nowadays. And it's very interesting to see this. This is the first real comedy that takes, first real romantic comedy that centers around the world of the internet as a whole. And I thought they did a pretty good job with it. It's mostly because of what Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan bring to the table. They're great actors. They work off each other so well. Their chemistry is very good, and it really does work very well here. It's an amazingly fun film. It's a really good film overall. I really enjoyed it a lot. I like the other movies that these two have been in, and this one's a great film as well. Definitely check this one out if you really liked what you saw with Sleepless in Seattle and Joe vs. the Volcano. You'll definitely really get a kick out of this movie. So that's You've Got Mail. Now let's get to probably easily the best movie that came out this week, and that is, of course, The Prince of Egypt. So this is DreamWorks' 2nd overall animated film, the first one, of course, being Ants, and really, this is a film that basically kind of showed that DreamWorks was a force to be reckoned with fairly early on. Of course, this is the story about how Moses became a prince of Egypt to a prophet of the Lord, chosen by God to carry out his ultimate destiny to lead the Hebrews out of Egypt. A story we've seen done over and over again, whether you've seen it in the Ten Commandments or whether you've seen it in other movies of similar fashion. My first exposure to this particular story was, of all things, the Rugrats Passover episode. There was a Passover special they did back kind of in between the original run of the Rugrats and when they revived it again, where they had Grandpa Boris telling the story about how telling this story with the Rugrats characters and the roles of these characters. You got Tommy as Moses and Angelica as Ramesses pretty much in that version. And that was the first time I realized that the Pickles were actually half Jewish. That's something that a lot of people probably don't even remember until they realize that episode that came around. And I think by this time this movie came out, they also did the Hanukkah special too. So maybe people did know by then. But like I said before, this was the film that really cemented DreamWorks as a force to be reckoned with. This is an idea that Jeffrey Katzenberg had been wanting to do for a long period of time when he was working at Disney. And when he finally left Disney in '94 to co-fund DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg, they decided to make this movie, and they hired a bunch of animators from both Disney and the then Amblimation, who later merged over to DreamWorks. And they basically put together a movie like this, and really, it really is a force to be reckoned with. This is probably one of the most underrated animated films you will probably ever see. This is an incredible movie that really is probably the best version of the story they could ever do. I mean, this is a story that has been done so many times. Sometimes good with the Ten Commandments, and then sometimes really bad with Exodus, Gods, and Kings. Like, I don't care if Ridley Scott is involved in that. I don't care if it has Joel Edgerton and Christian Bale. That movie was a mess on so many levels. But this is the best version of the story you could possibly tell. And it's a great movie, man. Like, everybody in the voice cast, this is a big voice cast, and everybody fits these roles so incredibly well. Val Kilmer and Ray Fiennes as Moses and Ramesses. They're terrific in this. You've got Michelle Pfeiffer, Sandra Bullock, Jeff Goldblum, Danny Glover, Patrick Stewart, Helen Mirren, Steve Martin, Martin Short. Some great music by Stephen Schwartz. I mean, the soundtrack alone is worth the price of admission alone. You get to hear two of the greatest voices of all time, Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey singing "When You Believe," which actually went on to win the Best Original Song Oscar, and it was actually the first time an animated film outside of Disney and Pixar had won that Oscar, as well as the first DreamWorks animated film to receive 2 nominations and winning one. Of course, they would later find success with Shrek and Wallace and Gromit: The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, but it was a film that, like I said, showed that DreamWorks was ready to play with the big boys. It's really convenient that there's a song in this movie called "You're Playing with the Big Boys Now," because that's pretty much what they were doing at this point. They were proving to everybody that, hey, Disney can do what Disney is great and all, but we can make a movie just as good as Disney, if not surpass what Disney had done. And this movie is the prime example of it. I mean, this is a film that still holds up after so many years, blending the traditional animation along with this unique CG animation that they have in here. The water scene at the end of the movie, where of course you have the famous scene where Moses parts the seas and you see the water, that still holds up 25 years later. It's amazing how well this movie has held up after all these years. And it's just, I can't recommend this movie enough. This is such an amazing film. It's one of the greatest animated films of all time, one of the most underrated animated films ever, because, I mean, it was a big hit when it came out in theaters, but it was largely forgotten almost I would say it's largely forgotten almost pretty much immediately after it came out, which is surprising to think about. That I mean, it wasn't until recently, in the last, 4 or 5 years, that it finally got its proper Blu-ray release and eventually a 4K release just this past year. It really has not many flaws. There are a couple little nitpicky things here and there, but overall, I can't recommend this movie enough. This is easily the best movie that came out this weekend, and easily one of the best movies of the year of '98. And like I said, one of the best animated films of all time, one of the most underrated animated films of all time. It's a classic film. It's a film that deserves to be seen every Christmas, every Easter. It's definitely worth a watch. The Prince of Egypt, I highly recommend it. I can't recommend it enough. If you haven't seen it already, do see it. You are doing yourself a huge disservice by not checking this movie out. So that's The Prince of Egypt. So let's go ahead and move on to the last movie we have here, and that is John Boorman's The General. And sadly, The General in this movie does not go for a great low rate you can get online. Go to The General and save some time. Cheap joke right there. But it has Brendan Gleeson in there. This is a story about a Dubliner who pulls off 2 daring robberies but comes into conflict with members of his gang and attracts attention from the police and the IRA, who are dealing with the UVF, ultimately leading to his downfall. And this is a film that also stars John Voight as Inspector Ned Kenny. Adrian Dunbar is also in here. You may recognize him from Heroes. You also have Sean McGinley. Trying to see who else is in here. But like I said, this is a film. This is John Boorman. This is from the latter films of John Boorman's career, and John Boorman was kind of in a slump at this kind of point. Like, his films were not the more notable films that he did back in the days. Like, this isn't stuff like, Excalibur or The Emerald Forest or Point Blank or Hope and Glory or Deliverance. Those films, Like, he hasn't made a film of that caliber since then. Probably the closest one maybe is The Tailor of Panama, but other than that, though, that's not really a memorable film per se. But not of this one either. But I don't know, the trailer for it actually looked kind of good. And Brendan Gleeson is a phenomenal actor. I've seen him in so many movies, and really, like, there's nothing more you can say about this guy that hasn't already been said already. Go watch him in The Banshees of Inisherin. I mean, he's fantastic in that movie. He's been in a ton of great films. I don't think I need to tell you how great of an actor he is, but I'm sure he and John Boyd probably elevates this to a really great film. I mean, I've never seen the film before, so I can't really say for certain, but I mean, it's John Boorman, and it has some good reviews. It's got Brendan Gleeson, it's got John Boyd. I'd have to think something good has to come out of this in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, not much more to say about that one. That is The General. Alright, so that does it for this episode of Time About the Movies. Next time we meet, we'll wrap up 1998. We have 9 movies to look at. Notable films, including Robin Williams as Patch Adams, Julia Roberts in Stepmom from director Chris Columbus, The Faculty with Jon Stewart, Elijah Wood, and written by Kevin Williamson of Scream, Mighty Joe Young, Disney's remake of the King Kong sequel, The Thin Red Line, Terrence Malick's latest film, Hurly Burly, John Travolta in A Civil Action, The Swindle, and The Theory of Flight. So 9 movies to look at overall. And then after this, I'm already looking ahead to 99. We're finally getting to the part where Box Office Mojo is including more movies. So there's not going to be a 1998 leftovers episode because the next week there's at least 6 movies that are going to be on here that I'm going to be able to talk about. So. But 9 we're going to be looking at on the next episode. So we'll wrap 1998 up next time. But until then, thank you very much for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the plays on the next page. Check out the previous episode. And also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time for the next video. And until then, as always, take care.